Welcome to Introduction to Esoteric Healing. I'm Dr. Barbara Briner, and for the next hour I'm going to be talking to you about what is esoteric healing and how it differs from other forms of energy work. First of all, let me just introduce myself, that I'm an osteopathic physician and I've been in practice for a number of years, and that my type of practice is pain medicine. And part of my quest and understanding is why people got where they are. And in part of this was in 1986, a book came into my lap, New Age Healing by Brenda Johnston. And it wasn't so much about the book as what was in between the lines that was intriguing to me. And this is a woman that wrote this book. She's English, and it was about esoteric healing. So I invited her over for to give a workshop in 1986, and we've been doing esoteric healing ever since, and started teaching this material in 1989. This work was developed in the early 60s by Brenda Johnston in England, and in conjunction with a radar scientist, Rex Ryant. Rex Ryant was able to see the points of energy in a person's energy field, but Brenda had the metaphysical understanding through her work in the arcane school. And so it was a perfect marriage in philosophy and practicality. Brenda brought in the philosophy and Dr. Ryant brought in the practicality. And he taught her how to link these points of light in a person's field, and found that if she did this, then their stomach pain went away, their headaches improved, joint pains felt better. And as she experienced more and more success, that she was eventually in the early 70s invited to participate in what in England they call festivals, in this country they call them conferences. And so she had the opportunity to teach her first class in the early 70s in esoteric healing. And it was successful, so other people wanted to learn it as well. And so at this point now, there's over 60 teachers worldwide teaching esoteric healing. The most, of course, are in England. Secondly, there's the United States. Third is a close third is Germany. Other teachers in Canada, Greece, Poland, Czech Republic, Russia, Italy, Australia, Zimbabwe, and occasional class in Brazil. Just to name a few of the countries. So my point being is the work that I'm describing here is not my work. It's work worldwide that was developed by Brenda Johnston. And so I'd like to talk a little bit now about what is esoteric healing. Esoteric is a word that tends to put people off, thinking they equate it with occult, but it's not occult. Esoteric means hidden, meant to be found. And so these principles of esoteric healing have always been present. It's just the application is different. And so this is the same energy that's used as Reiki, healing touch, Barbara Brennan's School of Healing, Donna Eden. Same energy is used as acupuncture. It's like schools, like fish, that in the water, that it's all the same water, it's just that how they use it differently. So it's all same energy, it's like how we use it differently based on our own philosophic approach and the technique. And so they're just different paths up the same mountain of healing. So let's talk now about this bioenergy field, or this human energy field that surrounds us. That as you can see, that this permeates the energy field and the physical body, but extends beyond the physical form. So this physical form is permeated by energy, but it extends beyond us. And this next slide shows what are called nadis, N-A-D-I-I-S. It's a Hindi word that we don't have anything in this country or in the West that describes it, but they're like small tubules or strings that helps to dissipate this energy through the field. And where we have, as you can see on this next slide, where we have a number of these nadis that are crossing, or a few of them rather, we have acupuncture points, of which there's over 1,000 of them. Where we have a larger number of them crossing, we have what are called minors, energy minors. So all the joints, each organ has an energy minor, And where we have a large number of them crossing, we have energy, what are called energy centers or chakras. And so that all of the structures in the body that were present at birth continue in this lifetime in the energy field. Even if they were removed an hour after birth, you'd still be able to find them in the energy field. So if a person has their gallbladder removed, that someone who's trained in this work can still find the energy template of the gallbladder, even though it had been removed years ago. Or if a person had her uterus or ovaries removed, that those would still be in the energy field. Now this is particularly important in our current situation with all of the Iraqi and the Afghanistan vets coming over with amputations, these traumatic amputations. And this phantom limb pain is very, very real pain because the injury pattern is still held in the etheric template for that extremity. So they are still experiencing the pain from that limb, even though that limb was removed. But it is treatable once we know how to treat the etheric pattern of trauma that is maintained. So it's important to remember that all the structures at birth are still present in the energy body. So from early birth until the time we leave this body. Now also within this energy field are emotions. That emotions and thoughts condition this energy field into what we think, what we feel, can eventually produce health or they can produce illness. And so all of these condition the energy of the energy field and make us who we are. And so found within this energy field, we have the energies of physical illness and injuries. We have emotional stresses such as anger, depression, happiness. We have mental aspects, like are we fluid thinkers or we tend to be rigid in our thinking. And also then we have the energies of the spirit, the spiritual energies of our higher self. So all of this is contained in the energy field. All of this is accessible to us in esoteric healing. So in this next slide, it shows the different levels of the bioenergy field. And you can see the etheric, which is closest to the body. And then the next is the emotional body. The next out is the mental level. And then the highest and the most pronounced and highest vibration is the spiritual energy, or the energy of our higher self. And so you can see then that we're not just talking about layers like layers of Neapolitan ice cream, but these are vibrational levels we're talking about, different levels of energy, so that the lowest would be the etheric, actually is the physical body, and then the highest is the spiritual level. And so this is all determined by spiritual or by energetic vibration. And so we have all these different aspects of ourselves that relate to these different levels. And so within our energy field, we have these 7 centers or chakras. And these are major, major centers, just like LA and Detroit and Chicago are metropolises compared to Lansing and Grand Rapids and some of the other mid-sized towns. Now these chakras have huge responsibilities. Each one of these centers is responsible for an organ system, so they energize that organ system. They also have very strong emotional contributions, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Now in this next slide, you see that each one of these 7 centers is associated with a nerve plexus. So that because the centers are related to the body, but energetically, you're not going to find this in Gray's Anatomy. But you can find these nerve plexuses, or these groupings of nerves, in Gray's Anatomy. And so, such as the cardiac plexus for the heart center, the celiac plexus for the solar plexus, and others. So each one of these centers is directly related to a chakra. And so on this chart, you'll see that on the left side, we have the centers related. Each one has a physiologic system. So, for example, the basic center is responsible for the urinary system, the kidneys, the bladder, and also the spine. The sacral center is responsible for the reproductive organs and the hips, knees, and feet. Solar plexus is responsible for the digestive the digestive organs and so on. But also, and very, very importantly, each one of these centers has a very important emotional component. So the heart center teaches us about unconditional love, nurturing, and compassion. The solar plexus is also teaching us about acknowledging our emotions, not to suppress them, but to acknowledge them and as part of the spice of life. That if we suppress our emotions, life tends to be black and white. But with the acknowledgement and use of our emotions in a proportionate way, life then becomes colorful, like adding a good spice to a stew. And so our emotions are very, very important in our total makeup, but not to be suppressed. So then we have our energy flow. So how does this energy get into our body? Well, first of all, like I said, we have this energy all around us all the time. And so it flows in the centers from the back to the front. And it's distributed via these nadis through the energy system. But then the nervous system has the highest proportion of nadis of any of the physiologic systems in the body. And so these nadis are overlying the nervous system to energize the nervous system. So say, for example, it's getting to be lunchtime, and you're starting to think that you're getting a little bit hungry. So the energy is coming into your solar plexus. It's going to energize the celiac plexus, the nerves, and those nerves then are going to start getting the pancreas going. Pancreas releases hormones that are circulated throughout the body, so all the cells of your body then are subjected to the hormones that these endocrine glands produce. So this is how basically this energy gets into us and into our physical body and helps to control and maintain health or disease, depending on the problem. And so let's talk now a little bit about these chakras. Just very quickly, we'll run through them. The first is the basic center. The basic center is right in the area of the pubic bone, and it controls the urinary system and the spine. Now, the emotions that it controls is courage. Very, very important, because it takes a lot of courage to approach life on a daily basis in a positive way. So energetically, if someone was experiencing some degree of depression and we were assessing the energy centers, we'd find depletion at the basic center. So we'd say, oh, this person feels depressed. But then by treating it and getting energy moving into that basic center, then the positive outcome is courage. We feel stronger. We feel more able to approach each day with a little bit more positivity, even though maybe the problems haven't changed at all. So then the next one is the sacral center. And the sacral center is between the belly button and the pubic bone. And it's a very, very important one in that it deals with relationships, not just sexual relationships, but all relationships. Parents, siblings, co-workers, close friends. It's how we relate to other people in a meaningful or a not meaningful way. It also controls the hips, knees, and feet. So we talk about someone being grounded, able to stand on their own 2 feet and make decisions. And so the energy of the sacral center teaches us about relationships. The solar plexus is the next one up, the third slide, and that it controls the digestive system. And this is where humanity is now, living at the solar plexus. Just listen to the commercials on TV, Tums, milk and magnesia, Gaviscon, all these ones dealing with constipation and diarrhea, reflux, because these problems are so pervasive throughout humanity that this is where people are charged, is at the solar plexus. So the solar plexus is about the entirety of the digestive system. It teaches us about issues of power and control, about emotions. The next one up is above the diaphragm, and it's now we're dealing in those, is the heart center, and that's dealing with the energy that makes us humanity, and that's teaching us unconditional love for other people. It's the center for philanthropy, in other words, giving without the need to receive in return, compassion, nurturing. And so humanity is learning about those things. We're moving from the personality center of the solar plexus into the heart center of compassion and thinking of other people. And so the heart center controls the entirety of the cardiovascular system, the breasts, the muscles, and it's got a huge responsibility. Then moving upwards, we have the throat center. Throat center also has a very, very large responsibility. It deals with the lungs, deals with voice, upper arms, expression, hearing, and also the lymphatic system. So many, many problems associated with the throat center, but it's also the center for communication, being able to speak what we're thinking or feeling, as well as listening to what others are saying. It's our center for mental creativity and expression. Then we move up into the head center, and these are our spiritual centers. The first is the ajna, or the brow center, and this is the center of knowledge without study. It's like intuitive knowing, particularly of spiritual topics. And then we get into the crown center, is the very uppermost center. And this is one that is not used too much. It's quiescent because aspects of the brain are still controlled by the crown center. But it's very, very important in our spiritual development. And so as the crown center opens, then you can see then as in this slide that the snake at the top is the kundalini energy, that energy of wisdom that opens up this 1,000-petal lotus, which the crown center is named. And so that as that energy opens, then the mask of the persona lifts, so that mask of the personality lifts, and the true person is seen behind that. And so then we have what's called the perfected man. And so this is represented in the crown center. And you can see this in Western art, particularly in religious art, where we have the angel. And you'll notice that in the angel that the light shines from within outwards. And then they have the artist oftentimes will portray a crown on the angel. Why did an angel need a crown? That's because it's symbolic of the opening of the crown center. And so if you look at particularly some of the older art, you'll see that these angels and the disciples oftentimes will have this iridescent energy coming from their face, from their body, and oftentimes they have little crowns, and that is showing the spiritual development of these individuals. Then in the East, we have the portrayal of the Buddha, and that this is very common, particularly in Tibetan and the Tibetan art, that we see the Buddha sitting in this lotus, large lotus, petals, and this represents the 1,000-petal lotus of the opening. And then on all of the Buddha's heads is this funny-looking hat with kind of a little bulge. That also represents the 1,000-petal lotus. And so that's the opening of the 1,000-petal lotus of self-realization, of knowing that we are one in spirit, in experience, in a knowing. Okay, now let's go on to how we use this. That's our basic philosophy. And so we have the principles of treatment. And so first is to ask permission. We have to ask permission for the person we're treating. You can't just go in and say, oh, I think you need some energy work. I'm going to treat you. It'd be like, somebody coming into your house and say, oh, I just wanted to see what your house looked like. Well, I don't want anybody in my house unless I invite you in. And so it's the same way, is that in this energy work, we have huge responsibility in respecting the privacy of the individual. And so we have to have their permission, their vocal permission to treat. Unless it's a child, then we have to have the parents' permission to treat. And so we always have to have that permission. Then we have an inward centering process. And this is to get our own stuff out of the way. that because our energies are mixing, that you don't want someone working on you who's all upset and irritated and angry, because you could be calm and peaceful, and then you leave the treatment session and you're all upset and angry, but your treater feels fine. And so it's very important for us as healing facilitators to do what we call an attunement and alignment procedure to get our personality things out of the way so that we can bring in the higher energies of spirit as a basis and motivation of treatment. So it's much like what we're doing is like the water flowing through the hose. That the hose isn't really watering your garden. The hose is guiding the water to your garden. And so we're very much like the hose, directing the energy of spirit to that appropriate place where it needs to be focused. And so we do this through this process of alignment and attunement, where we're linking the heart to our higher self or soul light, and then to our hands, and then we link our soul light to the person that we're working with. We talk about that in the classes. But it's very important to know that we do this so that we're not just forcing energy into this person. It's an allowing process. And then in this picture, this isn't a picture of a page from a Zulu warrior handbook. This shows on the diagram on the left, these are balanced centers. Centers from the back to the front. They're flowing and nicely balanced. This would be a person who probably feels really good, very positive, and they've had treatment. The individual on the right, however, hasn't had treatment. So you find that the basic center is a little bit deficient, sacral center is a little deficient, solar plexus. Heart center is big, so this person has a lot of love. Throat center is a little deficient. So this person has things they'd like to say, but they're not saying it. And because of that, they're also probably a little bit depressed. So in treatment, this person will become this other person and become happy about what they're saying. And so that would be one of the outcomes of treatment. And so we use our hands then as a point of spiritual focus. So we're never touching the physical body, only our energy field. And so we link up and balance the organ or the body part, in other words, in the physical energy as it's related to the energy center. And we hold these points and allow the energies to balance. And the key point here is allow the energies to balance. And so here you can see we have the minors of the adrenal glands linked up to the basic center. And on this next one we have minors of the shoulders, elbows, and hands linked to the throat center. And so this helps in expression, not only creative expression, but also vocal expression. And so then we have a loving intent to be of service. And so we don't call ourselves healers, we call ourselves healing facilitators, because it's not that we're doing the healing, we are facilitating the healing energies for this individual. And so that this type of healing work we consider spiritual healing, because we're using focused spiritual energies to bring about healing. And so this is based on spiritual principles, but it's not religious principles. So you don't have to be Catholic, you don't have to be Jewish or anything. It's like you can practice this and it'll deepen what your spiritual practices already are. And we also teach a form of generic meditation. And so this is to increase the inward focus to spirit and also our intuition, and to lessen our focus on our personality as well as the personality of the person with whom we're working. So it's a generic meditation. It's not Christian meditation, it's not Hindu meditation, it's just generic because we all have the same makeup. So just to summarize this treatment process is that we have to have the person's permission. We are using our hands. We have to allow the treatment to work, and we're using our hands and our spiritual focus in this treatment. So how is this used? Well, we can assess differences in the energy centers and related organ systems, so that and so we balance the areas of altered energy flow from the center and restore the normal energy flow through the organ. So in the first slide, you could see the flow, the blocked flow in the pelvis and the congestion in the legs. And so that we can balance the centers that way to help with, if the problem is diarrhea or constipation, it might be menstrual cramps, low back pain, something like that, that we can work with them in that way. Now in this next slide, you can see then that this is drawn in a different way, that the energy of the soul is always focusing through, is trying to focus through the aspects of the personality. But if, say, we have in the emotional body, we have a habit way of being angry or being irritated or lack of self-esteem, over time, that's going to condition the lower vibratory levels and can manifest in the physical body as disease. And then you go to your doctor, and he or she gives you medicine, and you get a diagnostic code, which you turn into your insurance, and you get reimbursed for that. So that's definitely shown up on the physical body. Now, we also have problems in the mental level of energy. Maybe we have rigid thinking. We think that our way is always best. Or maybe we don't really have confidence in our thinking. And so that's going to interfere with the functioning of the throat center and the arms, shoulder, and hands, and may eventually, over time, filter into difficulties in those areas. However, we also have problems that are showing up in the energy field that haven't yet shown up in the physical body. So this is our opportunity to actually do some prevention, so these people don't have to get sick from these blocked energies. And so in my experience is that when we have energy flow through all the centers, a nice energy flow, this person is experiencing health and a sense of well-being, even though the problems haven't really changed externally. And so it's almost like the problems aren't so much in their face, they get a little bit of distance. Now, in this next slide, this is to remind me to tell you that we can also treat our pets. That mammals have very similar anatomy to humans. So whether you have a pet cow or a pet pig or pet horse or cats or dogs, that you can treat them very similarly. Now, hopefully, your cat, you're not going to have hairballs like your cat, but you can save a lot of money on vet bills by treating them first with esoteric healing. If that doesn't work, then you take them to the vet. But this will work for horses. I've treated horses with TMJ problems, spinal problems. Horses are very amenable to colic, and can be this can cause their very severe problems in horses. So all I'm saying is pets can be treated. Esoteric healing is very helpful in treating fractures and sprains. It increases the rate of healing. It works very well in post-surgical cases to speed up healing. It restores circulation, alters the lymphatics, gets the bowels moving. So it's very, very helpful in these types of situations. Now, other physical illnesses that would be pneumonia, bronchitis, asthma, ear infections, particularly in children, irritable bowel syndrome, coronary artery disease, many heart problems. This work is dynamite on coronary artery disease. So if you know somebody that's all set to have angiography, and if you get to them first, they may have to cancel their appointment. But back pain, neck pain, anxiety, it's also very, very helpful with grief. If someone's had someone pass and they're having trouble moving through the grief process, this can be very helpful to them, to name a few. Now, there's more complex problems that esoteric healing can be helpful for, such as schizophrenia and bipolar syndromes, depression, cancer. Now, cancer with esoteric healing is meant to be supportive and not as a replacement. Cancer is a very complex disease process, and that if someone comes to me and wants esoteric healing, rather than going and getting more of a medical type of treatment, I really won't treat them just from a medical legal standpoint. But I work with a lot of cancer patients who are undergoing the medical treatment, and it helps to stimulate the immune system as well as to bolster them from anxiety, depression, and particularly fear. Also, we have many degenerative neurologic disorders that are occurring: MS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. And if we can get to these people early and treat them on a regular basis, oftentimes you can slow significantly the progression of this disease process. And it's something that medicine really can't help. It can stabilize to a point, but they do very well with esoteric healing. It can also help in diabetes. Now, it doesn't help necessarily to cure the diabetes, particularly if they're on insulin, but it helps stabilize their blood sugar. And so they still have to watch their diet. They have to exercise, control their weight. These are karmic conditions, things that are brought in from earlier lifetimes. So these deeply chronic and progressive problems require frequent and ongoing treatment. So it becomes supportive to the person rather than something that they just surrender to in the medical process. It helps them. Now, some years ago, we did a study. So out of the success of our esoteric healing study group, that we decided to apply for a grant to see if our findings were actually statistically significant or just anecdotally good. So we designed a research study, applied to Michigan State, and actually got money from them, even though they didn't know what they were funding. It was designed as a pilot study, so that we really didn't know what we were looking for, but if we had statistically significant findings, then at a later date we could do a larger study. Now, this we only had 3 levels. All the treaters only had 3 levels of esoteric healing. Now there's 8. So we thought we knew a lot at that time, but at least we knew enough to do the treatment. But in this study, we had 11 treaters, and that's enough for any investigator to pull their hair out. Ordinarily, it'd only be 1 or 2, but we had 11, so that introduces huge numbers of variability. We're hoping that wouldn't happen, but the potential is there. And we had 48 subjects who we were working with. We did have statistically significant findings, and so which I'll go into in just a moment. And so in our title, you can see that 3 of us were employed by Michigan State University at the time, and our title was very generic. We didn't want anybody to know what we were doing, so it was just a palpatory method to determine and treat disease. And so then the next step was to advertise this in the newspapers to see if we could get subjects. So this advertisement was put in the Lansing State Journal, Michigan State News, and the Meridian Township Courier. We had the most response from the Lansing State Journal, which was surprising. And so we had about, I think it was 104 respondents. And so they had to call Carrie, that was listed here, and she did our first cut through and filtering process. So we ended up with 48 subjects. And the general criteria that they had to fulfill, one is that the 3 areas we had were headaches, low back pain, and arthritis. So they had to have discussed this with their doctor. It couldn't be their grandmother. And it had to be diagnosed by a doctor, not just someone down the street. And they couldn't be taking any narcotic medications because that messes up your findings. And also couldn't be simultaneously receiving massage, acupuncture, or physical therapy, because that also adds in a variant that you don't know how to control for. Now, in the arthritis group, they had to have pain in more than one joint, and they had to have at least 2 occurrences a week, and it had to exist for at least 6 weeks. In other words, we had to have something to measure. And then in the headache group, they had to have 2 headaches a week, and also had to have existed for at least 6 weeks and been diagnosed by a doctor. We didn't want grandma telling them, oh, you have migraines just like everybody else. In fact, it was a brain tumor, so this had to be diagnosed by a family doctor. Then the last was low back pain, and they had to have it for at least 6 weeks. They couldn't have had any surgery within 2 years and could not be in physical therapy. So our parameters shrunk down our first of our list of 103 or 4 respondents, finally down to 48 people. And we had an interesting demographic distribution. The majority of the respondents in our pool were female. They were also white, and the majority of them were married. Now, the average age was in the late 40s, so they were ready for something different in their life, so they came to this study. And that is very interesting. These were educated people. 47% of them had at least 4 years in college. 39% had at least 1 to 3 years of college. So these were very educated, married, white females, basically. And so then we had, the next problem was that in dividing people, this group, into treatment and non-treatment, or the treatment and placebo. However, we didn't know what the placebo would be, so we termed it low-intensity group, because we didn't know if someone sitting in a room that's dimmed with 2 people focusing on them, if that would be a treatment. Maybe at home they got 6 kids running around and this is the only period of half an hour in a whole week where they actually have quiet. That in itself may be a treatment. So we didn't know what a low intensity, what a placebo would be, so we called it low intensity. Another problem we had was to make the low intensity or the placebo group look like they were actually being treated, because most of these people came together, and we had to fake it and make it look like they were getting treated. But the problem is these people were trained treaters, and so it'd be like saying, now I'm going to put you on this bicycle, but don't ride. And so it'd be like having somebody stand up there, now don't treat. And so we actually developed a way to find out if they were leaking treatment. And so this is our energy treatment. So this was, we had a lot of new things to learn here. And so each treater had measures we had to fill out. And so we even had to design a new form for this process. And then as you can see here, that the people being treated also had measures that had to be filled out. So they were quite busy being filled out. And we had then our treater form that needed to be filled. Now, in this study, we didn't really know how to approach this. And we found out that physical measurement really didn't reveal anything. And so Robin Redner, being in the Department of Psychology, had 2 measures. One was a profile of mood states, and the other was a McGill-Melzack pain questionnaire. And so we used those. The profile of mood states had 6 scales of pain, from composed to anxious, agreeable to hostile, energetic to tired, as you can see on this slide. And so it was all focusing on pain and how we felt about pain. What is our reaction to the pain? The next one was the McGill-Melzack pain questionnaire, and there were 6 different groups. The first one was sensory, and that was descriptors of pain, our pain experience. The next was an affective scale involved descriptors, and that was like such as tension and fear. In other words, how did we react to this pain? The third one was the evaluative scale, and that would be adjectives of annoying, intense, unbearable. All of these things people had to focus on in their pain. Then we had miscellaneous, and that had other descriptors. And the 5th measure was in steadiness of pain, and then the 6th was pain severity. So you can see that for these people, they really had to focus on their pain for 4 weeks, actually 6 weeks out, focusing on their pain. So in this slide over here, you can see the summary of our findings. Now, it's very interesting on the profile of mood states that the high-intensity group actually became more anxious, and the low-intensity group became more calm as the treatment progressed. And trying to understand that remember the profile of mood states, these are the different, how we react to pain. And we figured out that they had only 4 treatments, so we were actually getting into their stuff, so to speak, but really weren't able to finish it. Whereas the low-intensity group were just kind of getting used to things, filling out forms and whatever, so they just got used to the procedure. Now, on the McGill-Melzack Pain Questionnaire, which is in the next grouping down, you can see the high-intensity group all had statistically significant decrease in their pain. And conversely, the low-intensity group had statistically significant increase in their pain as measured by this well-established McGill-Melzack Pain Questionnaire. So this was highly, highly significant that we had 11 treaters, only three levels of the treatment, and that we still had statistically significant improvement in chronic types of problems. Now, this was particularly important for me because it showed me as a teacher that this type of work is teachable, it's reproducible as a system, and it's not just a gift for only a few. You know, people say, oh, they're such a gifted healer. No, everybody can do this. You just have to want to learn to practice it. And so this is something that is highly teachable, it's highly reproducible. Now eventually this Dr. Redner wrote this up and published it in was actually accepted in a refereed journal. And we chose Subtle Energies, which is the journal for the International Society for the Study of Energy and Energy Medicine. This was volume 2, number 3 in 1991. Now I know that that's seemingly old now, but there hasn't been any updated research because everybody left Michigan State. However, it took a year after this manuscript was submitted for them to tell us that we were going to be rejected or accepted. And so we found out that the delay was because we didn't have any instruments. We didn't have any galvanometers or any fancy switches. We just had hands. And they couldn't figure out how we were getting statistically significant measurements without any instruments. So anyway, it was eventually published. Now, just to summarize this, that we have the energy field that surrounds and permeates our physical body. We have our 7 energy centers or chakras and minors and acupuncture points that interface in our physical body. And the energy field energizes the physical body by these centers, these minors, and these acupuncture points. And so what we think and feel and our emotions, what we think affects this energy, and it can ultimately produce disease. And so thus everything in our physical body is found in this energy field, but not all energy disturbances or alterations in this energy field have yet entered into the physical body. So this is an opportunity then for truly preventative type of work. And so that this, in a balanced way, it can affect the energy blocks. But we have to have the permission of the client. It's our intent to be of service to this person to help. We use our alignment and attunement process, and then we use our hands and our spiritual eye to direct the corrective energy without touching the client physically, but we are very much touching in the energy body. And so this brings a sense of well-being, and without any outer change in outer conditions. However, oftentimes it brings about for this individual the courage to make changes necessary. That so many people in a crisis condition have trouble making a decision to move forward, to make changes that will bring them into a better balance in their life. And so ultimately it helps the person to be who they're meant to be, and to help achieve their own potential at this particular time. Now that doesn't mean that they're going to ascend and be self-realized. I mean, if that's their time, then it is. But for most people, that it brings calmness, it brings a sense of resolution to problems, the crisis subsides for this particular time, but we always go from one crisis to the next in our lifetime. So, now I just like these hot air balloons because it's hopeful and it's joyful, and also reminds me to tell you about support. And so we have a number of books that we use in this work, and the first is an anatomy book, and not that you have to be, like I said, you don't have to know anatomy, but this anatomy book is it's Human Body, and by DK, and it's just a very good basic anatomy book, nothing too fancy like Netter, but something to give you a visual. The next is Vibratory Medicine by Richard Gerber, that he was an internist in Livonia, Michigan, and this is the third edition. And this book is quite beautiful in the fact that it presents different facets of alternative healing, including crystals, homeopathy, biofeedback, and also energy medicine, and includes significant research. It's very, very well referenced, so that for someone who needs to know the research, this is an excellent book. The next is Esoteric Healing by Alice Bailey. This is one that Brenda was basing this work on. This is the metaphysical basis of esoteric healing. The next one is Frontiers of Health. This is by Christine Page, and this is the first edition. I think she's got a couple other ones out now, but she is an English physician. The first half of the book deals with the metaphysical philosophy of health, just what we've been talking about, and the last half deals with the centers and the problems that are commonly associated with these centers, such as hemorrhoids, irritable bowel, heart disease, bronchitis, and asthma. So this is kind of like the PDR of medicine as it relates to the centers. The next one, for those who are more psychologically interested, is Eastern Body, Western Mind by Anadea Judith. And this deals with each one of the centers from much more of a psychologic perspective rather than from the medical perspective as Dr. Page would do. And so this was very readable, very helpful. And then, because core to this type of work is meditation, that we have this is a small book, short, wide margins, and in the back it's got a CD of guided meditations. It's called Meditation for Beginners by Jack Kornfield, and it talks about why people need to meditate, very simple ways of doing it, and then 6 guided meditations in the back. And then the last is this wonderful book, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, that he was from India and came here in the 1920s and established the Self-Realization Fellowship out in California, and now it's worldwide. But this is a beautiful book in that it talks about our ultimate human potential and the opening of the Crown Center and self-realization. So these are the books that can help you understand a little bit more. They're not required reading, but very helpful in filling out your and supplementing your understanding. We also have classes and teach this. We have 4 basic levels, and they're 4 days long, 4 to 6 months apart. There's no prerequisites. You don't have to have any prior energy work. You don't have to have any knowledge of anatomy. That we teach you what you need to know. You don't have to have any prior knowledge of meditation or any particular religious beliefs. You just have to have an open mind and a willingness to learn and practice what you have learned, and that you too can become an esoteric healing facilitator. Now we have several websites that you can get more information. One is www.bioenergystudy.com, and that's for the Institute for Bioenergy Studies. And the next is www.nehonline.org. This is for the National Association for Esoteric Healing, and there's more information here with links, as well as the opportunity to become certified in esoteric healing should you be interested in pursuing this line of training. So our next portion is going to be in demonstrating what this looks like.